Good afternoon, Frank. Our first session in 2013.
Good afternoon, Professor.
And after having wished everybody a Happy New Year, I wonder whether it really can possibly be a Happy New Year. I don't know whether I'm sure you've been reading all the things that have been written, winding up the last year and prognosticating what's coming, and it really doesn't look too good at all. Although I think it's all moving in a predictable direction towards a possibly better conclusion. But I was amused in particularly to see that in one blog that I read regularly that deals with the Middle East, this is by Juan Cole, called
Right.
Informed Comment. He says that 1,000 years ago, in the year 1013, the Middle East was in disarray because of a conflict between the Shia and the Sunni everywhere, and China was rising.
Oh, so the more things change, the more they remain the same.
Makes you wonder whether things really do change.
Mm-hmm.
However, of course, the actual context was very different.
Mm-hmm.
And that nobody in the Middle East knew that China was rising, and nobody in China knew about the Shia and the Sunni.
Right.
I don't think. But something that probably more people have read is The Economist's special issue of the world in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really quite a remarkable prognosis of disarray for the coming year, I think, and qualitative change in a number of things. I think that it's what we should expect, simply because more people are getting to know about things they don't like, and that are against their interests and are going to disturb what they're used to, and it's causing more and more unrest.
I think that turmoil, and I think that unease, and I think that chaos, all of which I think any sane individual would have to admit are on the horizon for 2013, work to accelerate the tendencies and trends of globalization. It causes people to begin to rely less on their institutional infrastructure apparatus and begin to rely more on each other, as defined by each other. And now you can assign a digital definition to the each other, because people have become very, very used to and habituated to being able to develop relationships online with each other over Skype, as we're doing now, and to be able to develop, in fact, very deep relationships insofar as political relationships, and even in some instances emotional attachments. And I think that when you look down the roster of potential hotspots, and again, God knows, we'd be able to make a fortune if we could guess where the hotspots will be in the next 12 months, but you can make some logical guesses, as you've identified already. China, in the Middle East. I think there's going to be some movement in North Korea now. They've invited Eric Schmidt, the nominal chairman of the board of Google, to go to North Korea. So, I mean, that may open that up a little bit, which in turn could begin to act as some sort of unification push on that peninsula, which would then perhaps force the United States, or allow the United States, to almost redefine the way it interacts with China, because we're no longer going to need that leverage with them anymore to keep Pyongyang in step. But you can go on with any possible permutation, but I think what's going to happen is that people are going to become drawn more closely to each other. And I think that by this time next year, we're having this discussion, we're going to be able to look back and very dramatically see that the institutions, as you identified in the fall, are continuing to decline in effect and power.
Well, every time there is unrest, people move. Every time people move, it accelerates change, because more people who wouldn't otherwise have met, who didn't know each other before, who are different from each other, meet each other, and get different associations, think of new things, and the rate of change accelerates. And I think that we're still in this period of accelerating change, and that's going to continue for a few years, which means that the degree of uncertainty in everyday life, the amount of shocking things happening, and how many weeks is it that we've not talked? And how many shocking things have happened in those weeks?
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't think I think we did briefly speak after the shootings in Connecticut.
did we?
I think we might have. I think we
And
might
after
have.
the rape in
We did not speak
Delhi?
after the rape in Delhi. Now, I
Uh,
mean, that alone was an amazing event. The outpouring of national grief, outrage, whatever. I mean, the Indian police were forced to shoot tear gas for 3 days in a row in front of the Indian Parliament in New Delhi. I mean, it was the first time, and probably since Nehru, that this sort of organized group sprung up. It was like a flash mob in response to what had happened on that bus.
well, India is such a remarkable country that it's. I should know what the territorially what proportion of the size of China it is, but it's got almost the same population as China in a very much smaller space, with the same amount of inequality in economic terms, but a much greater degree of inequality in cultural terms, because there's still this post-colonial elite who speak English better than I do, and are extraordinary people that you meet there, and some of them come over here, but there's a lot of them there that don't come over here.
Right, right.
And then, of course, it's never been fully integrated under one government that wanted to systematize everything in the way that China has. So there's an incredible cultural differentiation in England, in India, and it's only just recently, with cell phone, internet, and so on, that everybody has got to know about everybody else.
Right.
And I think that the control of everyday life, especially gender relations, was so serious, strict, until just a few decades ago, and has changed so far since then that it breeds this sort of behavior. But the way people react to it, of course, is violent.
Right. You know, it's funny you mentioned that. It brings to mind there was an obituary, I believe, yesterday in the New York Times of a woman who was 92, I believe, who passed away in New York, who had been born in Vienna in the early 1920s. Did you read that? And then she went to school in Japan.
Yeah.
And then her parents they were dislocated when she was studying in the U.S. at the time of Pearl Harbor. Of course, she couldn't go back, but she spoke Japanese fluently as well as a number of other languages. And then after the war, was somehow assigned to Douglas MacArthur's staff when he was writing the Japanese Constitution that remains in existence to this day. And she was given the throwaway assignment of put in the clause relating to women's rights. And this was it was a 23-year-old girl at this point, who then went to the Tokyo Library, what was remaining of it after Curtis LeMay had done his routine, and researched the world's constitutions and came back with the appropriate 3 or 4 clauses and put them in, giving women equal rights. And it stands to this day. And then she kept quiet about it until 5 years ago, because she didn't want to offend conservative right-wing governments in Japan, saying, oh my God, here it is, proof positive, a 23-year-old American girl wrote our Constitution as it affects women's rights. But somehow the news leaked out, and she received a steady stream of tributes from the Japanese government and women's groups in Japan, thanking her for giving them equality. And
no, I didn't see this in the New York Times.
Oh, I'll send you the link. But it was amazing. It was one of these happenstances of history. And you couldn't help but think of what occurred in India, where perhaps, I don't know the Indian Constitution, but I'm pretty darn sure that the world's largest democracy has in its constitution equality between the genders. So what
I wonder.
Well, that's true. We shouldn't necessarily say that as certain.
But I'm not sure that it was in the American Constitution or any European constitution at the time that the Indian Constitution was written.
It may not even be in the American Constitution today, hence that continued press for the Equal Rights Amendment. You could be correct on that. But it really, all too often, I mean, we're talking about globalization, we're talking about equality, we're talking about democracy, but often the most basic equality acceptance levels are not met, even in in India, which likes to tout itself as the world's largest democracy. And I'm sure I could find a number of American women working in this office who would come in here and talk to us about the glass ceiling and
Yeah.
tell us that it's not equal in this country.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, you look at the current composition of the American Congress, and for example, in the state of New Hampshire, both senators, U.S. senators, are women. The entire House of Representatives congressional delegation are women. I think there's only 3 from New Hampshire, possibly 2. The governor is a woman, and the Speaker of the New Hampshire House is a woman. How do you like those apples?
Now, but I saw other figures today about the Democrats and the Republicans in Congress, and I think it was that a majority of the Democrats are now not white males.
That could very well be true.
But 85% of the Republicans are.
Well, I'm sure that's true.
Now, I hope it may not have been white male, but it was something like that. And that's particularly interesting because I'm sure it would be very dangerous for me to try to characterize Democrats in relation to Republicans. But, but after all, Republicans are the Conservative Party, and conservatism means holding on to values of the past. And Democrats are looking to reorganize society for the better, and so it makes sense that there should be a relationship like that.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean,
just doesn't make sense that we should have elected a Republican majority.
They're very strange times. They definitely are, and everywhere you look at what may occur in Europe this year. You look at what may occur in Britain. I'm not so sure that government is not going to face a vote of no confidence this year, although I don't know. You look at what's going on in France, where you have characters such as the French actor Depardieu, walking away from his citizenship because he claims he's paid 145 million euros in taxes over his lifetime. And the regular Frenchman is like, well, so what? You make $1 gazillion. And then you have troublemakers like Putin, who announced quickly today that he had given Depardieu Russian citizenship. Depardieu, of course, was not reachable to find out whether he had accepted it. I'm sure it's just what he has in mind, spending December in Moscow.
I hope they gave him a fur coat as well.
Maybe he could stay in Kim Philby's old apartment. So.
No, but the efforts, well, the problems of organizing anything are becoming greater and greater, and I mean, you told me earlier on today about a new insurance offer for work in Pakistan, which obviously is something that exactly fits the current modern situation of uncertainty and global interaction. But I think that because of the degree of uncertainty everywhere about what's going to happen in any sort of relationship, the coming year is going to be exciting, to say the least, and all sorts of things are going to keep happening that are going to be a test of our ability to predict general processes.
No, I agree with that. And if you extrapolate what happens in Washington, which is a theater of the absurd insofar as showing how things can't work, and indicate then, well, all right, if that's how it works between the Democrats and Republicans, both under the same roof in the Congress, how in God's name could anything ever work in Europe, where you have different cultures, different countries? But yet, people adapt. I mean, the stock markets continue to go up after the U.S. has lost a rating, a credit notch on Standard & Poor's, after it faced the fiscal cliff, after it's faced all the other challenges. People adapt. They still continue to trade assets. They still continue to invest. They still continue to believe in the future.
But currencies are in disarray.
Currencies are in disarray.
The outlook for private equity is not good. Banking is being reorganized. I mean, everything that we've taken for granted over the last 50 years and seen in growth, it now looks uncertain.
It looks uncertain, but the other part of the equation is that there is always capital. There's always money. And as each day goes by, the pot of money increases simply just because of the compound interest theorem. And what happens is that money has to be put somewhere. It has to be put to work, and it has to be invested. So it's like water. You can't stop water. You can't keep it out of your basement. This is going to find some place to go.
But isn't the problem with that the rate of investment declined as the amount of uncertainty increased?
Oh, sure. And I mean, that's why companies such as Google and Microsoft and General Electric, and you can go right down the roster, are keeping the money in places like Bermuda and Ireland and other jurisdictions. They're not repatriating the money home. They're just keeping it in bank accounts over there. But those banks are not insured by the FDIC. So it's sort of a, well, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Well, FDIC only insures up to $100,000.
I think it's up to $250 now. But if you were really paranoid, I mean, you would take your chunk of billions of dollars and chop it up into a number of $250,000 accounts, which I'm sure some people are doing.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting time.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to follow it.
We shall.
I'll see you next week.
All right, Professor. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.